¿Qué tal, amigas y amigos de Hablemos de Ópera? Soy Gerardo Kleinburg y a nombre del Conjunto Santander de Artes Escénicas de la Universidad de Guadalajara y de nuestro proyecto Hablemos de Ópera, les doy la bienvenida a una de nuestras 2 charlas mensuales abiertas sin costo para todos ustedes. El día de hoy nuestra charla es una conversación y es una conversación extraordinaria con una persona verdaderamente importante a la que presentaré en un momento más. Como siempre, empezamos por hacer un par de pequeños anuncios. El primero es que Hablemos de Ópera tiene un nuevo curso. Nuestro curso se titula Del castrado al contratenor y podremos tener la oportunidad de hablar acerca de esta extraña tesitura que durante un par de siglos campeó por toda Europa, o más bien en particular por Italia. Hablaremos de cómo evoluciona, cómo desaparece, cómo es sustituida en nuestro tiempo por el contratenor. Así es que inscríbanse, el curso tendrá modalidad en línea el día jueves 31 de julio y el martes 5 de agosto y una modalidad presencial el día 3 de agosto. Escriban a hablemosdeopera1@gmail.com o también envíennos un WhatsApp al 55 43 47 0283. Por otro lado, queremos también hacer un anuncio que tiene que ver con el Conjunto Santander de Artes Escénicas. Para la gente que esté en Guadalajara o que pase por Guadalajara, las invitamos a que asistan a la gala de ópera con el Mexico Opera Studio en la Sala Plácido Domingo el 23 de agosto a las 7:30 p.m. Es una gala operística con destacadísimos cantantes jóvenes de este importante estudio de ópera regiomontano de la ciudad de Monterrey, y tendrá a la Orquesta de Cámara Higinio Rubalcaba, a la Orquesta Solistas de América, bajo la batuta de Alejandro Miyaki, y teniendo entre sus solistas a Fernanda Allende, Itzel Jauregui, Eduardo Nieve y Carlos Reynoso. Antes de empezar, quiero hacer una pequeña presentación en español. Nuestra conversación será en inglés. Quiero platicarles un poco quién es Matt Dobkin, que es nuestro invitado del día de hoy. Es el director de contenidos creativos de la Metropolitan Opera House de Nueva York, una de las instituciones culturales emblemáticas en el mundo de la ópera, de la que hemos hablado tanto y cuyas transmisiones operísticas en sitios como el Conjunto Santander o como el Auditorio Nacional tenemos el gusto de comentar antes de las funciones. Desde su puesto como director de contenido creativo, Matt se sitúa en un punto clave entre el arte, la estrategia y la narrativa, dando forma a la manera en que el Met se comunica con sus públicos dentro y fuera del teatro. Su trabajo abarca desde la creación de campañas editoriales para nuevas producciones hasta el diseño de contenidos que conectan la ópera con temas sociales actuales, siempre buscando ampliar el alcance del Met hacia públicos más diversos y contemporáneos. Finalmente, en una era en la que la ópera se reinventa constantemente, la labor de Matt consiste en encontrar nuevas formas de contar las historias que ocurren sobre el escenario a través de diversas plataformas. Es también una persona que tiene una labor muy destacada dentro de las transmisiones en vivo que hace el Met de Nueva York. And dear Matt, welcome. Now I can welcome you to this conversation. Thanks for being here. It's an honor and it's a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here and speaking with you. And I just want to thank your viewers in advance for bearing with me and letting us do the conversation in English, because my Spanish is slowly getting better, but it's not good enough to have a proper conversation. So thank you for listening.
I'm sure we will have more than one conversation, and I'm sure one of them will finally be in Spanish.
The next one we'll do in Spanish, yeah.
Matt, I've tried to describe in Spanish the different aspects of your role as creative content director at the Met. But before we dive into our conversation, I'd love for you to tell us in your own words what your work at the Met involves, and especially what you do for the live in HD transmissions.
Sure. Well, it's really been kind of an evolution, because I've been at the Met as of last week for 19 years, which is hard for me to believe. And so I was hired in 2006. I started in the summer of 2006 at this moment of real transition, like new administration at the Met. And I had been working as a magazine editor and writer in New York. So editing articles, interviewing various people, artists, performers, and covering classical music as well. And so the Met called me because they wanted to kind of amplify their press department and sort of rebrand it as editorial and communications. So they wanted me, since I had a magazine background, to be their editorial director and really expand the kinds of editorial offerings that the Met did. So in the past, you would come to the Met, you would get your program, and there would be some, very good but scholarly articles in there that weren't necessarily geared towards a broader audience. So I was brought in to create much more content, both for the playbill, the program, and for the website that was intelligent and insightful, but geared to a broader audience.
I know it very well, very, very well, because it also has this part which has to do with educational areas. It's a big thing. Bravo.
A big education department as well, which is, does amazing work. But so that was what I was originally hired to do, was really focus on editorial content. And this, of course, was before social media. That expanded quite quickly into marketing content and, the creative side of our advertising and email blasts and digital marketing, which was starting to sort of take off, and also quickly morphed into the HD transmissions. I had worked for a little while before I came to the Met for a documentary film company, so I had some experience on that side of things as well. So I started the first season of HD, which launched in December of 2006, my very first season, as a writer for the series. So I would write the host scripts and the interview questions that you see during the intermissions. And then, which I still do, and that has sort of expanded. I'm now one of two content producers, and this colleague and I, we sort of conceptualize everything that you see aside from the performance on the stage. So, we work with Peter Gell to figure out who the hosts are going to be, what the content and the intermissions are going to be, all kinds of trailers and things that we produce, some pre-produced features that you see, interviews with artists, that are pre-produced during the intermission, and as well as all the live content that you see. So yeah, basically that's my role on HD, is to sort of conceptualize and then produce all of that interstitial content, the stuff that happens surrounding the performance.
It's amazing. It's like also telling what the opera is about besides what it is about. I mean, what else it is about, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, our host intros that we write, they have to sort of check a few boxes. We need to give, tell you who the cast is, and we need to give you, a little bit of plot and some information if it's a new production and the director has some, interesting new concept for the show. We need to sort of share that information. That's just sort of very literal, informational detail. But then the whole shows, especially the intermissions, are all about deepening that and giving context to the piece that you're seeing, right down to even just the sort of behind the scenes footage that we show. You're getting the performance, but we try to, also give a kind of 360-degree view of the experience and the process and everything that goes into putting on the stage that performance that the audience is watching.
This broadcast began, as you just said, in 2006. It's been a long time, and It's been a huge, amazing, maybe even unexpected success. Mm-hmm. I must admit, I never expected this kind of growth. What's your overall assessment so far? How have these broadcasts helped the Met and its audience? What remains to be done, according to you?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it launched in 2006, and I can't remember, there were maybe 5 or 6 performances that first season, maybe just 5.
Remember there was Madama Butterfly among the first.
Yeah, Madama Butterfly. The very first one was the English language Magic Flute, exactly. And we also did Butterfly, the Anthony Minghella production of Butterfly, Barbiere di Siviglia, the First Emperor. I know him. Oh, and
the First Emperor. Wow.
Yeah, that was one that the first season as well. But it was only in a handful of countries that first season. I can't quite remember the number, but it was not a huge number. but and of course, Eugene Onegin was, I think, the final one of the season with Renee Fleming and Dmitry Vorostovsky, which is even still one of the best HD transmissions we've ever done. And it just was a sensation right from the beginning. It got tons of attention, tons of press. We won a Peabody Award, Emmy Awards. And it just, it really was one of the things that raised the profile of the Met at that moment. And the Met had always been, or for many, many years had been, a global company thanks to our radio broadcasts, which are seen in, heard in many, many countries around the world and have been since 1931. Mm-hmm. But this was another way to sort of reach other audiences. And it just took off, and that we started doing more performances each season. The number of countries and theaters just grew and grew and grew exponentially. So it's been quite amazing. And I think in the very beginning, one of the hopes, aside from just creating more attention for the Met, was that this kind of technology, HD, quality footage, was going to attract newer, younger audiences. And I think it did that to a certain degree. But the big surprise, maybe not so much of a surprise, but the other very notable factor was that it really extended the opera-going life of our older audiences. So for people who were diehard opera fans who had been coming to the Opera House for many, many years, who perhaps it was harder to travel to New York or travel to the Opera House, tickets, while we have many, many programs to get affordable seats at the Met, it can still be an expensive proposition to come, get great seats at the Opera House. So, going to the cinema transmissions is much more affordable. So, yeah, I think it really just became this sensation right out of the gate. And, it's been an evolution in terms of the programming there, and in terms of like the ways we sort of tell the stories behind the scenes. But I don't really think the product, and you should tell me because I know you've been an audience member for many years as well, I don't think necessarily the product has changed that much. We've refined things. Sometimes
maybe the cinematography is now unbelievable. That's quite something. I even think it's like a new genre. It's a new genre. It's opera, of course. It's an opera performance, but it's opera, but it's cinema, but it's something different.
I absolutely 100% agree. And, people always used to say in the beginning, well, so what do you want me as an audience member to do? Do you want me to go see it in the Opera House, or do you want me to go see the thing in the movie theater? And the answer is sort of actually both. There's such different experiences. And I have to say, I have experienced this myself recently because I'm in Mexico City now. Usually for many, many years in my role, I am in the TV production truck parked right outside the Met, with all the wall of monitors and it's chaotic in there as the director is calling the shot.
I'd love to be there.
Next time you're in New York, well, you can have a visit. It's very exciting. But I've been in the Auditorio Nacional for the last few shows as an audience member, texting my colleagues during the show to make sure everything is going properly. And it's a phenomenal experience there, and just so different from what you get in the Opera House. I was especially struck. I was there for the performance of Fidelio near the end of the season. And often these days, productions, they have stage business happening during the overtures of operas. So you come to our production of The Marriage of Figaro and you hear that glorious overture, but there are singers and actors on the stage doing stuff. It's not like the old days where the curtain would be closed and you would sit there and just sort of listen to the music. Fidelio is an older production, where they do keep the curtain closed during the overture, and our HD director Gary Halverson is absolutely brilliant, and the way he shot the orchestra and the conductor Susanna Malki during that overture was absolutely thrilling to see. Just to get these close-ups of the orchestra players, to get the close-ups of Maestro Malki, who was super compelling on camera. That's the kind of experience that you just cannot get when you're in the Opera House. So it's not a replacement for the experience in the Opera House. It's just another way to experience what we
I
do.
completely agree with you. Let me change a little bit the subject. More than ever, contemporary operas are addressing urgent social issues.
Mm-hmm.
How does that shape the Met's content and outreach strategy?
Well, it's interesting. We have been making great kind of progress in terms of the kinds of outreach projects that we work on. And it is so fascinating I'm just thinking about some of, when we do a new production of, say, La Traviata, you talk to the director and you get a sense of his concept for production, but it's still a show that exists from the 19th century, an opera from the 19th century, and we sort of all know what we're getting into with La Traviata. When you do a new or recent opera, something like Florencia en el Amazonas by Danielle Catan, or X, The Life and Times of Malcolm X by Anthony Davis, the fact that you're dealing with recent work, or another example, Dead Man Walking, which we did by Jake Heggie with Joyce DiDonato a couple of seasons ago, the fact that you are, often working with a living composer, or in the case of Dead Man Walking, Sister Helen Prejean, who wrote the memoir on which the movie is based and on which the opera is based. She's around and very active and really wanted to get the word out about our production of the opera. It creates all these opportunities and different kinds of projects that you just don't sort of think to do or can't do for a standard repertory work. So in terms of the outreach, I think you wanted to touch on the fact that we did this epic marathon reading of the entire autobiography of Malcolm X. And that was an idea that came from the director of that production, Robert O'Hara, and some colleagues and I who oversee the public programming initiatives at the Met. We met with him. We told him, we are committed to reaching out to new audiences and different communities, and this opera is the perfect way to do that. And in a brainstorming session with him, he said, well, what I think you should do is open the doors of the Met and invite people in for free to listen to a reading from page 1 to the last page of the entire autobiography of Malcolm X.
Wow.
Which was, super ambitious and hard to pull off, but a brilliant idea. And we did it. And so for one, I can't remember if it was a Saturday or a Sunday, probably a Sunday, we opened the doors of the Opera House. We started at, I think, 6 a.m. The whole thing lasted 18 hours and 15 minutes or something like that. And you had people coming in over the course of the day. Some people would sit for a half hour and listen to the story being read and then leave. We had a few people who showed up at 6 a.m. and stayed till the bitter end. They did not move the entire 18 hours. And we had this incredible mix of readers. We worked with a theater company called Elevator Repair Service that has done this kind of thing. They do complete readings of the entire Great Gatsby by Fitzgerald. So they were hugely helpful in sort of figuring out how to chop up this book and give little sections to different readers, some of whom, were famous actors, and others were students, local students. It was a total mix of people. So it was all very sort of democratic. That's the kind of outreach initiative. And people were so appreciative of it. I can't tell you how many people came up to me as they were leaving to thank us for doing this. They were so grateful. That's the kind of outreach project that gets a lot of attention, reaches a lot of people, that you can do. You have the idea to do things like that when you're doing a newer piece like that may have some political component to it or may not. I mean, just to use Florencia as an example, another recent work, that was the third opera in Spanish in Met history, and the first in about 100 years or something. And, it obviously from Mexican composer Danielle Catan.
New Met, I think, the first opera in Spanish at the New Met.
Definitely at the New Met. I think there were 2 short Spanish language operas, and not Mexican, but from Spain in the early days, back in the old Met, like early 20th century.
Albéniz, the Goyescas de Albéniz.
Yeah. Exactly. And we had Eileen Perez starring in the title role, Mexican-American soprano, who was so moved by doing this piece. It was so emotional and important for her. So we partnered with various organizations. We did an event in partnership actually with the Mexican mission to the UN at the United Nations in front of this amazing Rufino Tamayo mural that they have there. So yes, these are the kinds of things that just emerge when you're sort of talking to the creators of new work. And ideas that are born from these recent operas that you just kind of can't do when you're doing a production of Rigoletto.
Matt, and what about next season? Are you planning to do some things like this for next season? And please let us know a little bit what we can expect during the next season in live in HD. For instance, I know that you are doing Sonambula, and as far as I know, I hope I'm not wrong, it's been staged by Rolando Villazón, the Mexican who's now doing his debut as stage director. There's also an opera which has a lot to do with Mexico, El Sueño de Frida y Diego, by Gabriela Elena Frank. Tell us a little bit about your plans regarding these operas.
Yeah, I mean, so both of those operas, Sonambula and El Último Sueño de Frida y Diego, will be in HD in movie theaters. The Sonambula production is directed by Rolando Villazón. It's played in a few theaters in Europe already, and it's coming to the Met now. So that's really exciting. You know, he's an absolutely, I'm sure your followers, your Mexican followers on Facebook know how brilliant he is. Friend
of mine, of our project. He's been several times doing this conversation like this. So you bet we'll do something with Rolando regarding that production.
I mean, he's just amazing. And he hosted our HD transmission of Florencia a couple of seasons ago, and he was amazing. And he's irrepressible and brings his crazy energy to everything. I mean, he's fabulous. So I'm sure there will be, panel discussions and other sort of projects with him relating to that production. Of course, it's super exciting to have Nadine Sierra and Xavier Anduaga, Spanish tenor, starring in the new Sonambula. And El Último Sueño de Frida y Diego, that is one of the things I'm most excited about. That's a brand new production. The opera had its premiere a few years ago, I think maybe in 2021. So the piece exists, but our production is brand new. And it's by the director, Deborah Coker, Brazilian director and choreographer.
We know her well. Yeah, she's been recently in Mexico, very recently.
She's so cool. And she did our production last season of Ainara Mar by Osvaldo Goliath, which it's one of my great regrets that was not in cinemas, because it's an amazing piece and it was a spectacular production. So we're excited to see what she does with her production of Frida y Diego. Again, that's the composer is Gabriela Elena Frank. The librettist is a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright named Nilo Cruz, an American. We have a lot of plans for related things for that production that we haven't actually announced yet, unfortunately, but there will be partnerships with other cultural organizations in the city. You and I were talking before we got on here. I'm very excited to be in Mexico City, and the fact that this particular opera is set in multiple actual locations, including the Casa Azul here in Mexico City. So there is just so much opportunity for interesting content and creative partnerships and initiatives that we could do. That doesn't open until May of 2026. So we have some time to put that in place. But those are the kinds of pieces. Frida y Diego especially, that, as I was saying with things like Dead Man Walking or X or Florencia, they're just like a gift in terms of the kinds of projects that you can sort of create connected to the opera.
Well, let me just tell you that Hablemos de Opera platform, which gathers tens of thousands of followers, fortunately, is willing to help with that project. Whatever you need from us, you'll have it.
Well, actually, I have a question for you and your viewers.
Okay, good. I love that.
Because we are just starting to think about, not just starting, but we're in the process of sort of making some requests of possible hosts for the HD transmissions next season. And as you know, often there are opera singers who happen to be in the Met in other shows, not singing that day, so they will come in and be the host and ask the questions. Sometimes we get outside, sort of famous performers like Christine Baranski, American actress. Audra McDonald has hosted a couple of times. Angela Bassett actually hosted the Malcolm X broadcast. So, if there's a show that feels a little different or special, where it merits finding someone outside the realm of opera to be a host, that's always exciting. So
what about one of the descendants of Frida Kahlo herself?
Send me an email. Yeah.
Seriously, like a personal conversation. What about that? Could be. Why not?
Whether that person is a host or just someone that we interview, it's a great idea. But yeah, people should put in the chat if they can, any ideas for like who's a spectacular someone you want to host, in the way that Rolando was the perfect host for Florencia. Who should host a production of an opera about Frida?
I am not prepared to give you an answer now because it won't be an intelligent answer. Let me think about it, and I will certainly make some suggestions. But I feel honored and flattered that you are opening this space to place this question and to ask for our help. We will gladly give it. Wow, that was a thunder here. The Met has recently staged operas that are not only artistic but deeply political, as you've just mentioned. Where do you draw the line, if there is one, between opera as art and opera as activism? Nowadays, with such an incredible turmoil going around the world, what do you think about that line or that division?
I can't really speak for my colleagues who program what we put on our stage. I'm sort of only on the periphery of that process. But I don't think there's ever a specific goal to be activist in our programming. I don't think that's a word anyone would use when they're thinking, we need to sort of take action and have an activist point of view when we're programming stuff. I definitely think that contemporary opera composers often address, difficult social issues, and we absolutely don't shy away from that. I think we're really intrigued by stories that have contemporary relevance, and they have a place on our stage, especially because our season is long and we do 18 productions a season. There's room for contemporary works that have maybe a political point of view in addition to doing La Bohème and Traviata and all these things. So
also political, huh?
Yeah, but so I really think it's more about trying to tell stories that people in New York and around the world are going to connect with, and that they're going to find relevant and resonant today, rather than sort of taking on some activist, stance. It's more about, when we came back from the pandemic, after we had been closed for about 18 months, the first opera we did when we were coming back was Fire Shut Up in My Bones by the jazz composer and trumpeter Terence Blanchard. And that was something that Peter Gelb had planned to stage. I'm not sure if it was later that season or the following season, but after being closed for so long, and during the pandemic in the US, we had this summer of George Floyd and protests, and it felt like a really appropriate moment to not just put on Fire Shut Up in My Bones, the first opera by a Black composer in Met history, but actually to make it the opening night of the season. So those are the kinds of decisions that we make. I think artistically, like, this is an eminent composer, Terence Blanchard. He deserves a place at the Metropolitan Opera. His piece, maybe there's some sort of sociological or political underpinning to it. And actually, we're going to make it the showcase, show to launch our season. I think that just felt like a really interesting story to tell, and a really worthwhile moment to give that piece such prominence, less than like we need to like be activist and make a major political statement.
I completely agree. Matt, finally, how do you envision the future of editorial content in cultural institutions like the Met? What new ways of telling opera stories would you love to explore? Can technology still help you to your work, to your purpose?
Well, I'm sort of thinking of two answers there. In terms of editorial content for the Met, it has just expanded and expanded and expanded. And, especially since social media, so for the last 15 years or something, there's such an appetite for this related content. So I think, and our team has just grown and grown. When I first started at the Met, there were like a couple of us writing some articles and putting some content up on the website. And then we now have 2 in-house videographers at the Met who film rehearsals, film, stage performances, create trailers and, promotional videos. We have a dedicated social media team now that also are sort of, doing some interviews and creating fun social media content and interviewing artists and in rehearsals. So I think the future is for that to just continue and expand. Personally, one of the things that I would love to do, and this does not touch on technology at all, but I'd love to do a few slightly longer form video explorations of the creation of a new opera. So, and we have one coming up in a few seasons, and we've sort of started capturing content really, really early in the process. Because I think that's, sometimes by the time our team gets to talk to a director or a composer, a piece is usually very, very far along in the process. So I think people would be fascinated by a kind of start to finish documentary style look at what it takes to commission, conceive, and compose, workshop, bring to life in every way a new opera. So that's the sort of content side of things. And technology, we'll see. I mean, you and I sort of, before we got on this call, touched briefly on like, how's AI going to affect things? And I don't have an answer for that, except to say that I'm sure it will affect things.
It will. Yeah. I don't know if I'm thrilled or frightened.
I think I'm frightened, but I'm sure we'll find ways to harness the technology and use it. But yeah, I think the Met is an opera company, but sometimes it also feels like a media company at the same time, because there's just so much stuff that we are creating surrounding the opera productions. And I think that will just continue and probably grow and expand, because it seems that there's a real appetite for that.
Matt, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I'm sure it will help our audience to know much more about how the Met works. And I'm really sure this is not our final conversation. This is just
I hope not.
The first one, and I'm formally inviting you to launch with us the new Met season, which will be broadcasted at the Conjunto Santander, which makes this conversation possible, as well as the Auditorio Nacional and other venues in Mexico which are doing this work. Matt, thanks again so much, and I will just say bye-bye to our friends in Spanish. Amigas, amigos, gracias por haberse conectado. No olviden que tenemos un curso próximamente en Hablemos de Ópera, del castrado al contratenor, jueves 31 de julio y martes 5 de agosto, de manera virtual, y de forma presencial el 3 de agosto en la Ciudad de México, en la Colonia del Valle. Llámenos o escríbanos al 55 43 47 0283, 55 43 47 0283, o a hablemosdeopera1@gmail.com. Muchísimas gracias. Thanks again, Matt. See you soon.
Thank you.